one world government has a dark agenda. January 10th, 2023. President Biden, Obrador, and Trudeau meet in Mexico City to sign a new declaration called the Declaration of North America. But its true purpose is really step one in creating a one world government. The silent but deadly new declaration explains that while working together, all three countries can strengthen regional security, work on climate change, and immigration. In 2023, it was a landmark achievement according to the Biden administration. A new declaration declaring new things to come. He did not lie. 2024, he declared war. Nobody's heard of this because nobody was told about it.
Fear is what I'm feeling. A new and different type of fear. Everybody knows that something is very wrong. With the climate, politics, media, religion, and something much deeper. At the same time, we're all walking blindly into a very different kind of war. The type in which we have never seen before. Never in human history. A war that results in a one world government takeover.
With new war comes new weapons. No energy pulse weapon. The Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory at South Pole, Antarctica, is surrounded by mystery. Recently, a whistleblower came forward and explained that the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory is being used as an energy pulse weapon and is responsible for several earthquakes, weather anomalies, hurricanes, and world tragedy events. He explains that it has several military applications. However, its true purpose is even more interesting.
Directed energy weapon systems is something that people need to get in their vocabulary fast. The Ice Cube Neutrino Detector is not simply a passive listening device as presented for the science that they're claiming it to do. That there are technologies at the South Pole Station that people can't even consider that exist on this planet. I had complete access to every compartment they manufactured. That was a rare position to be in. It also has the capacity to transmit. There are embedded in the ice what are called digital optical modules, DOMs. They're about the size of a basketball. The array embedded in the ice is 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. It is the world's largest telescope. And now, because we have proven that it can transmit, it's the world's largest directed energy weapons system. It is responsible for the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2011 on the front end of the year.
What makes energy pulse weapons more terrifying is in a situation with no communications, because there is a blackout. The blackout is caused by what the military calls EMP weapons.
The Universal Peace Federation has now issued a warning on the growing threat of EMP or electromagnetic pulse weapons. Such an attack can knock out virtually all communications and other critical services of countries in a matter of minutes. For long, experts have warned that key electrical infrastructure in the United States remains particularly vulnerable to an electromagnetic pulse attack or EMP, likely to be orchestrated by China, North Korea, or even Russia.
Stepping back to the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory in South Pole, the whistleblower adds this.
Because I was present and I have gone over this with the pertinent people, but I will not be releasing their names. Spice is also for faster than light satellite communications, quantum entangled communications at great distance. And I guess it was the late 80s or early 90s, Gary McKinnon hacked NASA. And he found the list of the off-world space fleet and the captains of the ships respectively. We have a fleet out there. If we have a fleet out there, we need to communicate with them. This is that facility.
A hacker named Gary McKinnon stumbled upon one of his biggest hacks. He broke into the NASA mainframe along with tons of other military mainframe computers and got to see something very disturbing.
Found an Excel spreadsheet that was actually called, at least in the heading of the column, it said non-terrestrial officers. The non-terrestrial officers are fake names.
Gary McKinnon also was able to break into the NASA files about 10 years ago and retrieve some interesting information on a manifest list he came across the secret space program.
The non-terrestrial officers, I think, was on a Navy system with ranks and names, and then a separate sheet with tabs for material transfer between ships.
So estimate how many different ship names you saw?
I've got maybe 8 to 10.
NASA is responsible for covering up a lot of things. Check this out.
A guard told me that he was asked to burn some photographs and not to look at them. And there was another guard guarding him who was in green fatigues watching him burn the photographs. And he said he was too tempted. He looked at one and it was a picture of a UFO. And he was very descriptive. I can go into that later with anyone. He immediately was hit in the head and he had a big gash in his forehead. He was knocked out and he's terrified. So he would have to be protected.
Now this brings us to space, since we're talking a lot about it. Since 2024, the sun has been getting increasingly unpredictable. We've recently had Class X solar flare and solar storms. Classification for the worst type of solar storm that the sun can produce. The official word on the street is that the sun is in the middle of flipping its poles. 2024, we've had a lot of weird things happening in the sky at night, including a worldwide aurora borealis. And they're blaming it on this Class X solar storm. Those who know anything about Earth at all or how the geomagnetic field works, this doesn't make sense. There's two roads I want to go down on this. There's the absolute road that they say it is. It is a Class X solar flare storm that hit planet Earth. A great show of aurora borealis. However, there's the other side. I believe that they're simply covering up maybe something much deeper.
Last May, Congress held its first hearing on UFOs in over 50 years. Intelligence experts testified at the time about hundreds of encounters with unidentified objects and gave Americans a glimpse into some of the military's apparent run-ins with unidentified aircraft. And former high-ranking intelligence official is blowing the whistle on an alleged UFO retrieval program, which he says has been run by the U.S. government for decades. David Grusch claims the government is now in possession of partial and fully intact aircraft of non-human origin. And several current members of the program have corroborated some of those allegations with the Office of the Inspector General. Grusch says that information on the deeply covert program has been withheld from Congress and is now speaking out about this secretive program.
Vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
We have spacecraft from another species.
We do, yeah.
How many?
Quite a number.
Shortly after that, we had a solar eclipse. One that made the record books for being the most popular. Why? Because it's not only just a solar eclipse that seems to be rare. This one holds biblical meaning of biblical proportions. It also represents a change Why? I don't know. But why all of a sudden when NASA shoot 3 shuttles out in space just to capture data, collected images and photos and videos of this event happening, it just doesn't make sense. In a time that we don't have budget for things of this nature. That's the excuse they've used since we haven't gone back to the moon.
What would you say if I told you that by the year 2030, you'll own nothing, have no privacy, and yet you'll be happy? That you'll live in a cashless society where all currency is digital, and that everyone on Earth will require a digital ID to travel freely. And that much like communist China, you'll be given a social credit score that determines how loyal you are to this new global system and those who control it. The end game is a one world government. To many
where it made some predictions, critical predictions by 2030. One of the main key thing is you will own nothing and you will be happy. And it's interesting. There's a man who's smiling. He seems very peaceful. Sure, yeah. He's calm. He's got this really bright grin, and with the caption of "You will own nothing and you'll be happy."
Well, how does that work in their view? You will own nothing, yet you'll be happy. Yeah. What does that exactly mean?
Yeah. Well, they believe in a shared economy, meaning that, hey, everyone's going to rent out things, right? So, a lot of individuals who, I guess, criticize people like us who say that's not a good thing, they're saying, well, what if it's a world where it's a lot like Uber, where, people don't own their cars, they take an Uber, but,
Trust is built on fear, and fear alone. Currently, this is the most unsafe time in human history. Do you feel safe? I don't.
Guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Wernher von Braun, also known as the father of the rocket, some call him the father of space travel. He was responsible for creating the rocket that took us to the moon. He eventually became the director of NASA. What you're about to see is a recording of Carol Rosin talking about what was expressed to her on his deathbed.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosin. In 1974, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun, in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space. He said, no, you have to understand. This is February, and we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system, the first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy.
We have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie. A lie. I think I was too naive to know at that time the seriousness of the nature of of the spin that was being put on the system. And now the pieces are starting to fall into place.
Wernher von Braun was the director of NASA, and on his deathbed he did express that the United States has been covering up an agenda that he knew about. He said, "We have been weaponizing space for a false flag alien invasion." This is warned that the event would take place in the middle of World War III, and then unite us all under a one-world government, thinking that the whole world would have to work together to fight an alien invasion, to help the United States build a new world order.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. Our goal is not the conquest of Iraq. It is the liberation of Kuwait. It is my hope that somehow the Iraqi people can, even now, convince their dictator that he must lay down his arms, leave Kuwait, and let Iraq itself rejoin the family of peace-loving nations. Of peace-loving nations. Of peace-loving nations.
And now the pieces are starting to fall into place.
We are finally going to lead again. You see what's happening? You see the rockets going up left and right. You haven't seen that for a long time. Very soon we're going to Mars. You wouldn't have been going to Mars if my opponent won. And I can tell you, you wouldn't even be thinking about it. Space is a war-fighting domain, just like the land, air, and sea. We may even have a space force. We may even have a space force. Space force. Space force. Space force.
December 20th, 2019, President Trump officially puts together the United States Space Force as the newest branch of military. Did I just say December 20th? What year?
When it comes to defending America, it is not enough to merely have an American presence in space. We must have American dominance in space. Very importantly, I'm hereby directing the Department of Defense and Pentagon to immediately begin the process necessary to establish a space force as the sixth branch of the armed forces. That's a big statement. We are going to have the Air Force and we are going to have the Space Force, separate but equal.
2019, COVID-19 has been unleashed onto the world known as the coronavirus. 2020, COVID-19 is officially considered by the world a pandemic. Strange. Just before that, we were seeing rockets going up left and right. 2020, the Pentagon officially acknowledges UFOs are real and changes the acronym from UFO to UAP. The military releases 3 unidentified aerial phenomenon videos, and that the government takes it serious for the first time in history. 2023, the first U.S. congressional hearing on UAPs, or the older acronym known as UFOs, is held with whistleblower David Grusch, one of the most highest top officials to ever come forward and admit that the U.S. government has been covering up a UFO recovery program for decades.
has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured, and the activity
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because I tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
Also admitting that the U.S. has been retrieving and has off-world non-human vehicles and non-human biologicals. The words UAPs and non-humans were used instead, making this a new vision in the public's mind of what we are dealing with. 2024, 90 seconds to midnight. The closest to midnight that the nuclear atomic clock has ever been. It's based off of how many nuclear bombs are made, stored, and active in the world today. And also world conflict.
Card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie. A lie. A lie.
I'm Satan reincarnated. The Democrats, Biden is hiding people and sucking the blood of children. No, I'm serious. Now, you may not like me, and that's your right. You can't listen to people who say this was a peaceful march.
Have you ever seen face-to-face an alien being?
Yes, I have. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then we go back to how deep is all of this for real?
And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
I'll get to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multi-dimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine 3D objects such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross.
So it looks like South Pole Station in Antarctica is on to something. Everybody's talking about entanglement. Remember this.
The device is also for faster than light communications, quantum entangled communications at great distance. In, I guess it was the late 80s or early 90s, Gary McKinnon hacked NASA and he found the list of the off-world space fleet and the captains of the ships respectively. We have a fleet out there. If we have a fleet out there, we need to communicate with them. This is that facility.
It's called in physics entanglement, where everything's connected in the consciousness field, but also in physics. And so in order to understand going from a far distant star system to here, you're not going to do that in a straight line at the speed of light. You're going to do it through understanding what the physicists call non-locality, where nothing has to be fixed in space-time. And this gets into some very advanced concepts. But the ultimate non-local field is you right there. You're awake and conscious. Your conscious mind is, if you were to calm it down, this is what meditation does, and calm it down is actually connected to this field of consciousness that's everywhere.
We do know one thing for sure. The government is not running this country. I don't believe any government is running their country. I believe that somebody is running all countries. And now, this.
History.
It did not go well for the president. At the very beginning, he walked slowly to the podium, and when he started speaking, his voice sounded raspy and hoarse.
Very person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Does this look like a man that is capable of running a country, making decisions for NATO, the United Nations? Or does this look like maybe Pinocchio? What I mean by that is a puppet. Who's pulling the strings? Is it one person? Or is it a group? Or is it an administration? Or is it a dark, secret elite?
Americans, and now we're finding out, true to form with Joe Biden, who is one of the biggest liars in American history, that's exactly...
This comes as new numbers from the New York Federal Reserve Bank show Americans are getting crushed.
Does this look normal to you? Is this how we normally do our formal election process?
A lot of problems, and we saw that he was not articulate. He didn't make sense.
Many believe former Barack Obama might be behind the whole Biden administration. We do know one thing. He's been behind Biden the whole time. And Biden's been behind him.
Speed bumps keep popping up on President Biden's road to the White House again in 2024. More and more polling shows growing voter concern about his age, his son, the impeachment inquiry, his running mate, and their poor approval ratings. NBC News and now the Washington Post are taking note. The Post with this blaring headline, anxiety ripples through the Democratic Party over Biden. Senator Ted Cruz with this prediction of what's on tap.
In August of 2024, the Democrat kingmakers jettison Joe Biden and parachute in Michelle Obama. Barack Obama is already running the Biden administration. I think he is already the puppet master. I think the odds of Michelle Obama parachuting in August of 2024 have risen dramatically.
Now take that into consideration, and let's move along to what's currently happening today.
The two world orders we already see, but there's a third that is coming soon that's even more important, and that is the digital order. And the digital order is not run by governments, but by technology companies. We all know how much military support NATO countries have provided Ukraine during the war. But it's technology companies that provided the tools allowing Ukraine to defend itself from Russian cyber attack. It's technology companies that gave the Ukrainian leaders the ability to speak with their generals and their soldiers on the front lines. If it wasn't for those technology companies, Ukraine would have been fully offline within weeks of the war.
We have just declassified the classified. Today's Theory 1 is simply to tell you that this theory is confirmed.
In the search for signs of intelligent life, there's a new study that may suggest we are not alone. A group of researchers have identified at least 7 stars that might be surrounded by advanced megastructures known as Dyson spheres. Dyson spheres, what? Emily Finn joins us now to tell us more about this. Emily, Dyson spheres, possible megastructures, all of this is a lot to take in.
The thought is that potential superior intelligent life might be creating buildings or devices to harness energy around their home stars or planets, creating these so-called alien megastructures. This newly released study published by a group of researchers in the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society specifically looks at the theory around Dyson spheres and finds at least 7 stars might be surrounded by these alleged alien structures already. The aliens, I guess, have been busy. The group looked at infrared heat near stars located within 1,000 light years from Earth, a type of heat that can't otherwise be explained. It all stems from a theory from 1960s physicist Freeman Dyson, who believed if these structures in fact existed, scientists on Earth might be able to pick up on those infrared waves. News Nation's
Is there a war outside of this planet?
Can easily reach the phase of industrialization and building things and exploring space.
So this studies team had some pretty advanced tech. They used 2 active telescopes that are in space right now to conduct their research, but there is no conclusive evidence quite yet to determine what exactly is happening around these stars. Nick, do you think it might be alien structures?
I don't know if they're alien structures, but it seems as though the evidence suggests it's something that they want to figure out. Right?
Certainly something.
Yeah, definitely. Emily, thank you so much. A little bit creepy, though. Still for me.
A little bit.
Throughout this video, a lot of it is government official words, government reported information that you can find yourself. You just have to go looking for it because nobody's going to tell you anything. Sometimes you got to dig deep. You ask, how can companies control the world as a one-world government? Simply, they're the ones that are in charge of our military assets. They're the ones that make them. They're the ones that can take them. The one who holds the key can only unlock the door. What's inside is what they control. We are hidden from the truth. The truth is not hidden from us.